You keep trying to change your life, but every time you take one step forward, your mind pulls you 2 steps back. You say you'll stay focused, but within minutes, you're back on your phone. You say you'll control your temper, but the smallest inconvenience throws you off. You say you'll be disciplined, but motivation disappears the moment things get uncomfortable. You know this feeling. You've probably lived it all week. You sit down to work, and your mind runs away. You promise yourself you'll stop procrastinating, but you don't. You tell yourself you'll stay calm, but stress hits you like a wave. And the worst part? You don't know why it keeps happening. Inside your head, it feels chaotic, like a room filled with noise that never stops. Modern neuroscience explains it simply. Your brain is addicted to fast dopamine and trained to avoid anything difficult. That's why discipline feels impossible, even when you want it more than anything. But in Japanese mental training, there is a different approach to strength, a mindset built not on motivation, but on alignment. They call it Kyoumei-Shin. Kyoumei-Shin means the mind that stays in harmony with its chosen direction. A mind that doesn't bend every time emotion rises. A mind that doesn't break when things get hard. It's the discipline of acting like the man you decided to be, not the man your impulses want you to be. You'll see why this matters. Because once you understand Kyoumei-Shin, discipline stops being a struggle. It becomes something stronger, something stable, something unstoppable. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and tell me in the comments the habit you want to master. Now, back to the story. Ryo was 31 when things finally started to crack. Not in one big moment, but in dozens of small, quiet failures that added up over months. Every morning, he told himself, he'd wake up early. Every morning, he hit snooze 3, 4, sometimes 5 times. Then, he would rush out the door, already behind, already stressed. At work, the cycle continued. He'd open a task, stare at it for 30 seconds, then check his phone. Messages, notifications, random scrolling. 5 minutes became 10, 10 became 30. And by the time he returned to the task, he had no idea where he left off. This happened every single day. He lost track of simple things, replying to emails, finishing reports, remembering deadlines. Co-workers started noticing. One of them even joked, "Ryo, do you ever finish anything on time?" He forced a smile, but inside, something sank. At home, it was no different. He said he'd start working out, but he quit after the first session. He said he'd study for a certification exam, but he barely made it past chapter 1. Every night, he promised himself he'd do better tomorrow. Every night, he stayed up late scrolling, avoiding the guilt he didn't want to feel. His mind felt heavy, not dramatic, just tired. Over the next weeks, the consequences grew. He missed a minor project deadline and got a warning from his manager. He forgot an important appointment and disappointed a close friend. His parents asked how he was doing, and he lied, saying everything was fine. But everything wasn't fine. Fatigue built up. Discipline collapsed. His thoughts raced constantly, but his actions went nowhere. He was always busy, yet never moving forward. One night, after another long day of wasting time, he sat alone at his small kitchen table, phone face down, room silent. For the first time, he admitted the truth to himself. "I can't keep living like this." It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was a quiet breaking point. The moment he realized his life was drifting, and he had no real control over his own mind, and he had no idea what was coming next. Ryo met Haru by accident, a quiet man in his late 50s, working as a consultant for Ryo's company. He wasn't loud. He didn't give motivational speeches. He simply observed. One afternoon, after seeing Ryo struggle through another unfinished task, Haru approached him. "You're not tired," he said calmly. "You're misaligned." Ryo looked confused. He didn't know what to say. Haru motioned for him to sit. "There's something you need to understand. In Japan, we call it Kyoumei-Shin." He repeated the words slowly. Kyoumei-Shin, Kyoumei-Shin, Kyoumei-Shin. The poetic translation is the resonant mind, Haru said. But the functional meaning is simpler. The mind that stays aligned with its chosen direction. Ryo listened, unsure where this was going. Haru continued. For centuries, craftsmen and monks used Kyoumei-Shin to stay steady during long, difficult tasks. It wasn't about motivation. It wasn't about forcing willpower. It was about alignment between intention and action. He paused. When your mind and your actions move in different directions, life feels chaotic. When they move in the same direction, life becomes simple. Ryo looked down at his hands. The idea felt strangely familiar, yet completely new. Haru leaned back in his chair. "There's an old anecdote," he said. "A swordsmith once told his apprentice, 'A blade breaks when the mind that forges it wanders.' The meaning is clear. A drifting mind cannot build anything strong." He let the words settle. "In modern terms," he added, "you chase every impulse, every distraction, every mood. You let them decide who you are. But Kyoumei-Shin is choosing a direction and staying aligned with it, even when your emotions change." Ryo felt something shift, just slightly. Not understanding, but curiosity. For the first time in months, he felt a sense of clarity, even if small. "So, how do I learn this?" Ryo asked quietly. Haru smiled. "You learn it the same way the old craftsmen did. Slowly, simply, one aligned action at a time." He stood up. "This was the beginning of your real training. The next week didn't start with transformation. It started with failure." Ryo tried to apply what Haru taught him, but old habits pulled him back instantly. He sat at his desk, opened a file, and checked his phone 3 times in the first minute. He promised himself he'd stay focused, and then drifted into another cycle of scrolling. By Wednesday, he felt even worse. He wondered if something was wrong with him, if he just wasn't built for discipline. But Haru noticed. He approached Ryo quietly. "You tried to change your actions," Haru said, "but you didn't change your alignment." Ryo frowned. "What does that mean?" "Intent without direction is just tension," Haru replied. "You're trying to move without knowing where you're moving from." The words stayed with him the rest of the day, but he didn't expect what came next. A few days later, Haru invited Ryo for coffee. Nothing formal, just 2 chairs, a small table, and a man who had clearly seen many lives fall apart and rebuild. Haru shared a small part of his past, how he once worked in a high-pressure engineering firm, how he burned out twice, how constant stress almost destroyed his marriage. "I was talented," Haru said, "but my mind was chaotic, and a chaotic mind ruins everything it touches." That was when he discovered Kyoumei-Shin from an old martial arts instructor who told him, "A man who cannot align his mind cannot align his life." Haru used the concept to rebuild himself. Slowly, deliberately, he became calmer, more capable, more respected. Not because he worked harder, but because everything he did pointed in the same direction. Ryo listened carefully. Something about Haru felt grounded, like someone who didn't need to prove anything. "So, how do I start?" Ryo asked. Haru gave him 3 simple drills. 1. Morning stillness. Sit for 3 minutes and choose one direction for the day. 2. Single tasking blocks. 20 minutes on one task, no switching. 3. Daily alignment journal. Write what you intended versus what you actually did. Ryo thought it sounded too simple. Haru noticed. He smiled. "Simplicity is not weakness," he said. "It is control." Ryo started the next morning. 3 minutes of silence felt like 30. His mind jumped everywhere. Tasks, worries, random thoughts. He kept noticing how restless he really was. But he stayed with it. Then he set one direction. Finish the project proposal. For the first time, he wrote it down instead of keeping it in his head. At work, he tried the 20-minute focus block. He failed the first attempt, checking his phone after 8 minutes. He failed the second attempt at 12 minutes, but on the third, he made it to 20. It was a small win, but it mattered. Over the next few days, he practiced the drills. His alignment journal showed the truth. He intended 5 things, but finished only 2. He intended to stay calm, but lost patience twice. He intended to stay off his phone, but caved repeatedly. It stung, but it was honest, and honesty was new for him. By the second week, co-workers noticed he seemed slightly more focused. Not a lot, just a bit less chaotic. But then, as usual, things got harder. It happened during a stressful Monday meeting. Ryo was assigned extra work after another colleague went on leave. It pushed him over the edge. Old habits returned instantly. Phone checking, avoidance, frustration, zero focus. By Wednesday night, he felt like quitting everything, like the small progress he made was meaningless. Haru found him sitting alone in the break room. Ryo looked up. "I messed everything up." Haru shook his head gently. "No, you discovered your limits. Now, you train them." He sat beside him. Kyoumei-Shin is not the absence of chaos. It is the ability to continue in spite of it. Ryo exhaled slowly. It was the first time he understood that setbacks weren't failures. They were signals. Haru ended the conversation with a simple instruction. "Tomorrow, realign." That's all. If you're still watching, comment, "I'm listening." Over the next months, Ryo committed to the system. Not perfectly, but consistently enough that momentum slowly built. His mornings started with stillness. 3 minutes became 4. 4 became 5. Some days he felt focused. Some days he felt nothing. But he kept showing up. Work improved too. He completed assignments ahead of schedule. He made fewer mistakes. His manager commented, "You're getting sharper lately." It was subtle, but it meant something. At home, he felt calmer, less reactive, more present. He noticed patterns in his alignment journal. Every time he checked his phone early in the day, his entire direction collapsed. Every time he started with clarity, the day became manageable. Kyoumei-Shin became more than a concept. It became a filter. One direction, one decision, one identity. There were setbacks. Days where stress hit him, days where he drifted, days where he lost focus. But now he knew how to recover. He simply realigned. What matters, Haru reminded him, is not staying perfect. It's returning to your direction faster. Ryo started returning faster. The real shift came during a difficult week at work. A key client escalated an issue. Deadlines stacked up, and everyone around him panicked. 2 years ago, Rio would have cracked under pressure. 6 months ago, he would have spiraled into distraction. But this time, something different happened. He paused, took one steady breath, and aligned. One direction, solved the issue. He ignored the noise, ignored the pressure, ignored the stress. He worked slowly, clearly, steadily, one step at a time. His team watched him, surprised at how composed he stayed. By the end of the day, he solved the problem. Not perfectly, but effectively. His manager looked at him and said, "You handled that better than anyone else." Rio didn't feel proud. He felt stable, and something finally clicked. This changed everything. For the first time in his life, discipline didn't feel like a fight. It felt like alignment. He wasn't forcing himself. He was following the direction he chose. He didn't realize it yet, but he was finally beginning to change. Haru waited until Rio had months of experience before revealing the full structure. Not ideas, not theory, a system, a framework anyone could follow. They met in a quiet conference room after work. Haru placed a single sheet of paper on the table. "This," he said, "is the practical foundation of Kyoumei-Shin." At the top of the page, there were only 3 lines: one choice, one direction, one identity. Rio read it twice. Haru explained, "Kyoumei-Shin is built on 3 pillars. If you follow these, you won't drift anymore." Every morning, Haru said, choose one direction, not 5, not 10, 1. Modern neuroscience supports this. The brain collapses under too many priorities, but when you focus on one meaningful path, your prefrontal cortex activates the circuits needed for deep concentration. "You've felt this," Haru added. "When you choose too many goals, you accomplish nothing. When you choose one, everything becomes clear." He was right. Rio nodded slowly. "Discipline isn't about doing more," Haru continued. "It's about removing what breaks your alignment." He listed the main offenders: phone switching, multitasking, emotional reactions, unnecessary commitments. People fail, Haru said, not because they're weak, but because they're overloaded. A simple example: if Rio needed to finish a report, he turned his phone off for 20 minutes. Just 20. This alone doubled his output. Neuroscience calls it reducing dopamine interference. The brain works better with fewer stimulation sources. "Have you ever felt this too?" Rio asked himself quietly. "This is where identity forms," Haru said. Small aligned actions repeated daily reshape the brain. Neuroplasticity is simple. Repeated behavior becomes easier because neural pathways strengthen. Identity theory is simple too. Your brain believes what you consistently do. One aligned action a day, Haru said, is enough to change a life. Rio sat back. The system wasn't complicated. It wasn't mystical. It was brutally clear. One choice, one direction, one identity. Haru ended the lesson. Modern people fail because they chase stimulation instead of alignment. But if you follow Kyoumei-Shin, your mind stops drifting. And a mind that doesn't drift becomes unstoppable. Rio's transformation didn't happen in a single moment. It unfolded in stages, slow, steady, unmistakable. In the first phase, the changes were small. He woke up a bit earlier. He stopped checking his phone in the first hour. He completed tasks he used to avoid. Tiny wins, barely noticeable to anyone but him. But small wins build momentum. Within a few months, the second phase emerged. Rio's habits began to stabilize. He handled work with more clarity. He didn't rush. He didn't panic. Co-workers started saying things like, "You seem more focused lately," and "Your work has improved a lot." These weren't compliments he was used to hearing. At home, his patience grew. He snapped less. He listened more. His family noticed the calm in him, but the real test came unexpectedly. A major project at work collapsed. Files lost, deadlines pushed forward, the team in chaos. A younger co-worker panicked, and the entire room spiraled into stress. Rio felt the old urge rise, the urge to freeze, to avoid, to shut down. For a moment, he almost slipped back into the man he used to be. But then he caught himself. One breath, one direction, he aligned. He organized the tasks, delegated work, and focused on the most critical issues. People looked at him differently. Not as the distracted guy who always fell behind, but as someone steady under pressure. This time, he stayed in control. By the end of the week, the project was back on track. His manager called him aside and said, "I don't know what changed, but whatever you're doing, keep going." Rio didn't explain. He didn't need to. Kyoumei-Shin was changing more than his productivity. It was changing who he was. Months later, the transformation became obvious. His routines were solid. His focus was consistent. He no longer chased motivation. He acted from identity. He wasn't forcing discipline anymore. He was disciplined. He remembered how he used to live. Lost, scattered, misaligned. And he realized how far he had come. He wasn't the same anymore. Rio eventually understood something simple. His life didn't change because he worked harder. It changed because his mind stopped drifting. Kyoumei-Shin wasn't mystical or dramatic. It was the discipline of choosing a direction and staying aligned with it, even when emotions pulled him away. He learned that strength wasn't loud, it wasn't intensity, it was quiet alignment, repeated daily. The truth he discovered is the same truth you face now. Your life doesn't fall apart from a lack of effort. It falls apart because your actions and your identity move in opposite directions. When they finally move together, everything stabilizes. Kyoumei-Shin means living with intention instead of impulse. It means acting from identity instead of emotion. It means becoming the person you said you would be. This isn't just Rio's story. It's the story you can choose for yourself. Because alignment isn't talent. It isn't luck. It's a decision you renew each day. And when your mind aligns with your direction, the path becomes clear. Identity shapes direction. Stay aligned daily. Choose your direction. Become your identity. Before you go, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and tell me in the comments what habit you're working on. Now, back to your journey.